Yes, and welcome to episode 12 of Gridiron Glory. I'm Alexander Cook, and let's get right into the college football playoff rankings. But first, the reason we're doing a Wednesday podcast instead of a Tuesday podcast is because the college football playoff rankings release time yesterday, Tuesday, was moved back from its normal time about 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern to 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern. That's past when we can record our podcast. Therefore, we're having a special edition today. However, this is not a permanent solution. It could be, but be sure to follow us at the Football Kids. That's at the Football Kids, to make sure that you know how we're going to resolve this in the future, if we're going to have this problem again, all of that, and also live updates on all of the college football top 25, college football playoff top 25 games throughout the week, and also all the NFL games. We're bringing you the live updates during the weekend. Of course, during the week, we have ceased bringing you live updates for Thursday night football, Monday night football, Friday night games, anything like that. However, we do plan to do so on a Friday in Week 13. Will be action-packed. Week 12 won't be as action-packed. We'll talk about the week, but first, what you've all been waiting for, my analysis of the college football playoff rankings. And here we go. Number 25, we've got Texas A&M. Number 24, Stanford, moving back into the top 25. Number 23, Florida. Number 22, Washington State. Number 21, Western Michigan. And I should point out that Western Michigan, along with Alabama, are the only two undefeated teams in the nation. So very impressive right there. Number 20, Boise State. Number 19, Tennessee, crawling back in. Number 18, Nebraska. Number 17, Florida State. Number 16, LSU. Number 15, Auburn. Number 14, West Virginia. Number 13, USC. Number 12, Utah. Number 11, Oklahoma State. Number 10, Colorado. Number 9, Oklahoma. Number 8, Penn State. Number 7, Wisconsin. Number 6, Washington. Number 5, Louisville. Number 4, Clemson. Number 3, Michigan. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 1, Alabama. Now, the major shift in these rankings, as you can see, Ohio State going from outside looking in Week 10, the Week 10 edition of the rankings at number 5, they jump all the way number 2. You know, Maryland isn't impressive, but Ohio State whipped them. They got the job done. Ohio State, that one loss coming from Penn State, as Ohio State slides to number 2. Now, if you'll remember, Michigan lost to Iowa, yet they're still in the same spot as they were a week ago. I'm going to talk about that just a second, where I'm going to dispute this. I'm going to agree with this. We're going to just sift through the rankings in this entire podcast, all college football playoff rankings, everything that has to do with that. And then, of course, we have Clemson only sliding down 2 spots, Washington sliding down 2 spots, Louisville going up 1 spot, and then we don't have movement with Wisconsin. They had an impressive win over Purdue, not Purdue, Illinois, but Illinois is Illinois, so nothing special there. Penn State has moved up 2 spots from number 10 to number 8, and Oklahoma has moved up an impressive 2 spots to number 9. Colorado moves from number 12 to number 10, so a lot of moving 2 spots. And you know, here, let's just take a look at this. And with Texas A&M at number 25, I totally agree with this. Texas A&M loses yet again, this time to the Ole Miss Rebels. You know, Texas A&M losing Trevor Knight, their huge transfer from Oklahoma, and just not able to get the job done for Texas A&M. It's been rather embarrassing these past few games. And what can that one dynamic playmaker do? What that one dynamic playmaker was able to do is an incredible story, absolutely incredible player in Trevor Knight. But Texas A&M is not doing well, to say the least. Number 24, Stanford. How did Stanford even get there? We thought Stanford was going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't exactly turn out to be that great, but they won pretty impressively on the road at Oregon. And we should point this out, their last loss came to Colorado, and that was a 10-5 loss. It was quite the game right there. And they had losses. They were tripped up Washington, then Washington State, and then Colorado. But past then, the last 3 games, they're on a winning streak. They're going to face Cal. I assume they'll win. They're going to face Rice. I assume they'll win. I think they win out here, and then of course their bowl game. We should see based on that if they're going to win the bowl game. I'll give you all the bowl predictions for that. Number 23, Florida. And Florida, they've got the defense, and you can't argue that they don't have defense. They've got an impressive defense. Their offense slugging along, but getting the job done. A 20-7 win for the Gators last week against Will Muschamp's South Carolina Gamecocks, as Florida will face LSU. Huge SEC collision on the SEC network. And at 1 o'clock Eastern, it's going to be Saturday. One of the biggest games, of course, along with West Virginia, Oklahoma. That's going to be a big game right there. And there are other big games, but I've got to say that's probably the biggest win that they've got. And let's move up to number 22, Washington State. Washington State has been really impressive over these past few weeks. Let's just take a look at their schedule and how many they've won straight. And it's been very, very impressive. Let's take a look right now. They're 8-2, first in the Pac-12 North. Guess how many they've won straight? They have won 8. I didn't read that wrong. They won 8 straight after losing their first 2 games. These Cougs, you got to watch out. Washington Huskies, I don't think they're that good. You're going to have to play these Cougs. And let's just say I wouldn't be big on playing the Washington State Cougars myself, because they're red hot right now, perhaps even better than Washington, perhaps even better. Now, this is obviously disputed, perhaps even better than USC. I mean, it's pretty big, and you can't argue with that. Just can't. And let's continue on here. Number 21, Western Michigan, sweeping it 10-0 and going strong. Number 20, Boise State, they're doing a good job, but they had that one really rocky loss to Wyoming. And Wyoming is turning into a better football team this year than they have been in previous years. Definitely, not the best team. They're 7-3. Of course, they're going to be playing San Diego State. That's going to be a big game. But, Wyoming football is for real. Now, they barely 69-66 was the final score, lost to UNLV. But they're still in this hunt. In fact, one of their losses came from Nebraska. So, pretty impressive with Wyoming football. I've been very impressed by them overall compared to previous years. Number 19, Tennessee, beating the good old friends from up north, those Kentucky Wildcats. And with that win, a 49-36 win, they get to face Missouri on CBS. Still not a game I'm very interested in. And let's continue on. Number 18, Nebraska, looking good against Minnesota. Didn't look too good against Ohio State, though. But Tommy Armstrong back. I don't think Nebraska's the elite of football. I don't think, they're the greatest team in football, but, they're up there. Number 17, Florida State. I mean, they play Boston College. You're supposed to blow them out. And Florida State got a check there. LSU at 6-3. And number 16 in the country, LSU. And a lot of people thought that they were going to lose to Arkansas last week. They had the past 2 years after both times hard losses to Alabama. Instead, what happens? How about LSU? 38-10 beat down of the Arkansas Razorbacks. So payback from the past few years right there. And let's move on to number 15, Auburn. Defense looks really sharp against Georgia. The offense was pitiful. They couldn't get anything done. They lost Cameron Petway, their star running back. Just not a good situation over there. Number 14, West Virginia. Since that one loss to Oklahoma State, they've been doing a pretty good job. USC, monumental win over Washington, in my opinion. And this is close. You've got Colorado and you've got USC, maybe the best team in all the Pac-12. Right there with the USC Trojans making their comeback bid. Number 12, Utah, more Pac-12. And Utah with 2 losses. Of course, if you'll think back not too far, you'll know that one of those losses came to Washington, their most recent game. They took down Arizona State 49-26. Their other loss came to Cal, so not exactly the best loss there, but Washington's a respectable loss, and they're going to go on the road at Colorado in week 13, and that's going to be, there are a lot of games to watch that week. That's going to be one of them. Then number 11, Oklahoma State. And remember that controversial game? You have to think a long way back against Central Michigan. And if you think all the way back to that game against Central Michigan, a lot of controversy there. And somehow, Central Michigan gets away with the last second play, laterals all over the place. I can't even describe it. And it's actually in week 2, and that was a lot of drama there. So there's one of your losses. The other loss came on the road against Baylor. Meanwhile, Baylor has crashed downhill. But, impressive for Oklahoma State Cowboys. Barely winning against Texas Tech. That's been the story of Texas Tech's season. But, a lot of barely wins. You barely get away wins on Oklahoma State's schedule, but wins are wins, and that's how they're up there. They look like a quality team right now. Number 10, Colorado. I love these Buffs. I can't tell you how much I love the Buffs right now. And it's not because I'm biased towards the Buffs. It's just I love what they're doing, and we haven't heard about them in all these years, and now look at what they're doing. Huge, and I mean huge matchup coming up. Washington State, Colorado. It's 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Don't miss it. That's one of the top games of the week. You can't miss that game. I know I'm going to be watching. That's going to be huge. But anyway, the last game they played was on the road against Arizona. They won 49-24. But here's the thing. One of their losses came to a respectable team in Michigan. Their other one came to a respectable team in USC. Both relatively close losses. Now, the Michigan loss, not that close, 17 points. But 4 points against USC, that's pretty impressive. So I'm very impressed by what this Colorado football team has done. How about Oklahoma winning out since that Week 3 meltdown against Ohio State, complete beating of the Sooners at home, but then they respond, and I tell you, have they responded? They responded. And the Schooner going big, and remember opening loss against Houston. Houston's not on this top 25. They almost lost to Youngstown State. They lost to SMU. Let's take a look at what's happened. They're only 8-2. These 2 losses have come from SMU and Navy. Now, excuse me, pretty impressive. Excuse me, their other loss almost came from Tulsa, not Youngstown State. I don't know where I'm getting those names from. But they're going to face Louisville at home this week, Thursday night. Be sure to watch that one. We're nearing Louisville now. Number 8, Penn State. And, it's 45-31 against, you've got Indiana, which, I think it's a good team. Indiana, the record doesn't show good team. The record doesn't indicate it. But they've been holding out. They're, at the time, 5-5, fourth in the Big Ten East, the competitive division. And their losses, now Northwestern, not that great of a loss. Nebraska, decent loss. Ohio State, decent loss. Wake Forest, and that's kind of in the middle between decent and terrible loss. But it's been kind of respectable. And then Penn State, obviously, was a lot of respect there. But, these guys have been keeping it pretty interesting in these wins and these losses. And it's been pretty close. They've definitely got a program heading in the right direction. But Penn State gets a 45-31 win. They were up 38-31. Indiana tries to tie things up back in fourth game. A lot of fun. And it's a scoop and score for Penn State that gives Penn State a 45-31 win. And then we have Wisconsin, complete beatdown of Illinois. Washington, the Huskies having some problems in Seattle against USC. Number 5, Louisville. And of course, that's Washington's only loss. Wisconsin's 2 losses, one from Ohio State, one's Michigan. Basically, the best teams you can have a loss to on that schedule. Now, LSU is disputed, but they won against LSU. A win's better than a loss. Then we've got number 4, Clemson, with that one loss coming this week from Pitt. Very impressive right there for Pitt. And just looking at Pitt right now, let's just take a look. And the Panthers, they're 6-4, but their losses have been close. Loss to Virginia Tech was 39-36. Loss at Miami, not too close, 51-28. Loss against UNC, very close, 37-36 loss. Lost to Oklahoma State, very close, 45-38 loss. So only one loss coming right before the week that the Panthers upset. That the Panthers upset Clemson was against Miami. So pretty interesting there. And so that's just quite the interesting thing right there. And another team that lost, Michigan, number 3 Michigan. And they were number 3 at the time. They're still number 3. They lost to Iowa. That's their only loss. But Michigan's resume versus Clemson's, we'll have to talk about that. Ohio State, number 2, one loss to a good Penn State team. And looking really sharp. They didn't look that sharp against Wisconsin. They didn't look, but we thought that was a good team. And they are a good team. They didn't look that sharp against Penn State. They're a good team. And Northwestern, but then Ohio State comes back. They smash a ranked Nebraska team, and then they take care of business against Maryland, to put it lightly. So definitely a little bit more respect there now. But let's continue on. All right, so now in the top 10, what do I agree with? What do I disagree with? Let's start number 1, Alabama. Well, I didn't even talk about number 1, Alabama, but why? 10-0? Now, number 1, Alabama, I think Alabama's overrated. Garbage! Alabama's number 1. Number 2, Ohio State. I agree with that. That one loss to Penn State, but they've rebound. They've made an impressive comeback. Give me Ohio State number 2. Here's where I start to have the problems. Michigan at number 3. They didn't go down a spot. Let's take a look at Michigan's resume versus Clemson's resume. We'll take a look at the entire season, okay? And, of course, this week they're going to face Indiana. Of course, man down, perhaps, because this is disputed, but perhaps Wilton Speight, the star quarterback for the first-year quarterback for the Wolverines, may be out because of an injury, and he will have a replacement who is supposedly very good, but if that report is true, it's disputed, then we will see that quarterback against a decent Indiana team in Week 12. And Clemson's schedule, let's pull that up right now. All right, so let's start with Week 1. Clemson plays tough non-conference, good scheduling at Auburn. Michigan, they play tough non-conference, good scheduling at home against Hawaii. Yeah, well, if you schedule some decent non-conference, and it's fine. And then, of course, you can have those games. Week 2, Troy, that's terrible. So, like I was saying, if you have that one good non-conference game, that's fine. And then, of course, Michigan obviously would have their hard, not exactly. UCF? Are you kidding me? UCF? And we talk about the Big 12 lack of non-conference opponents, with the exception of I'm very respectful of Oklahoma and what they have done. But UCF, and this was a UCF team that was 0-12 in 2015. Now, they're not exactly 0-12 this year, but UCF. That's the best you can give me. Of course, they'll have one more non-conference game. And then Clemson, South Carolina State, not that good, but Auburn makes up for it. And then we've got Colorado. That looks really good on paper, really good. And it's good on paper. I'll give it to you. But here's the problem. Colorado did not look good when that game was scheduled. So let's take a look at Colorado's in 2015. Were they elite like they are this year? No, they're 4-9. 4-9. So I'll give a half to Michigan because, they struggled. They got the job done in the end. Colorado is good. But 2015, this shows that Michigan is not dedicated to scheduling non-conference opponents. Yeah, we talk about the big, bad Big Ten. Not exactly. All right, now let's move on. Next week, Week 4, we've got a conference game for Clemson. Not the best team in Georgia Tech, but at the time Georgia Tech was 3-1. Now, the thing was here, the South Carolina State game was a blowout, but the Troy game and the Auburn game for Clemson was extremely close. So you perhaps had reason to worry, but we had Georgia Tech coming up. Let's see if they can actually do it. And they quieted a lot of critics with Georgia Tech. They won 26-7, decent win there, but I'm not going to call it a quality game. So Right now, Clemson leads 1-1.5 against Michigan for quality games. Week 4, and Michigan plays a Penn State team, which at the time was not at the level they are now. And that's why they're going to get a half for this, and they're going to tie Clemson. They're 8-2 right now, and one of those losses came from Pittsburgh, and that was week 2. And then they go play Michigan week 4. They already have a loss, again, another loss. That's why Michigan only gets half a point, because Penn State was not what they are right now back then. So there you go. It's 1-1. Then Clemson played Louisville, and they get a full point there. The time Louisville was great. Right now, still pretty good. And I say pretty good because look at the rankings. They're number 5 Louisville. You got number 5 Louisville. It's 2-1 now. That was in week 5. But Michigan, can they match in week 5? They've got Wisconsin. That's a full point. It's 2-2 right now. The next week, week 6, Boston College is nobody. Meanwhile, Michigan, good old Rutgers, nobody. Then we had a bye week in week, and then we had a bye week in week 7 for Michigan, and for the Clemson Tigers, we had a game. It was North Carolina State, and it was a hard win. It's not really going to get you anywhere. And now, Clemson remains with their 2 points. All right? Clemson remains with their 2 points. And that, of course, is to Michigan's 2 points. And then we move on to week 8. And so Clemson didn't play in week 8. Can Michigan take the lead? No. They played Illinois. Week 9. Who takes the lead here? Michigan plays Michigan State. That's really good. Oh, right. They're not good this year. Clemson, they played Florida State on the road, Doak Campbell Stadium. Give them the point. Now we've got a slight Clemson lead at 3-2. Can Michigan match? They play Maryland next week. That's huge. Not exactly. Then they play Iowa and lose, and we don't count losing games. So, and Iowa wouldn't exactly go into quality. So that's why I think Clemson, which wins 3-2 in quality games, should be right at number 3. However, Michigan, I agree, follows at number 4. Louisville, number 5. But could we actually replace Michigan with Louisville? Well, anything's a possibility, right? Let's take a look at Louisville's schedule. Remember, Michigan had 2 in the end. Here are Louisville's big games I'm going to use. I'm going to use the Florida State win, which would be half a point because Florida State was not that good at the time, and they really have nothing to match, and they're barely getting away from these bad opponents some weeks, especially last week. Even though in the end it's 44-12 against Wake Forest State, Louisville still trailed in the fourth quarter, and that tells me that Louisville is number 5. Washington lost. They're number 6. Wisconsin number 7. But could we actually replace Wisconsin? Could we move Wisconsin up a notch? Let's take a look at Wisconsin's schedule. No, we can't because it's now a game of 1 loss versus 2 losses. But what about Wisconsin versus Penn State? Now, we know Oklahoma, we know Colorado. We're going to keep them there. But the final debate, Wisconsin versus Penn State. Let's take a look at the Wisconsin schedule. Let's take a look at the Penn State schedule in terms of quality wins. Penn State, they have one quality win, and that's Ohio State. Meanwhile, I'll give them two. I'll give Iowa's half, and I'll give Indiana's half. They have two quality wins, and that's being generous. Wisconsin, one quality. At the time, this was a half, so I'm giving LSU's a half. Then I'm giving Iowa's a half. That's 1.5 would be Nebraska, and Wisconsin doesn't match that. So I'd put Penn State over Wisconsin, but when you consider good games, not necessarily ones that you win, LSU 0.5, Michigan 1.5, Ohio State 2.5, especially close in the Ohio State game, although both were side by 7 points. That Ohio State game is a closer game. And then we have 3.3 Iowa, 3.5 Nebraska. Can Penn State offer? They can offer 0.5 with Pitt. They can offer 1.5 with Michigan, 2.5 with Ohio State, 3 with Iowa, and 3.5 with Indiana. So I actually think Penn State should be ranked over, and I mean over Wisconsin, but Wisconsin, number 8, I think they're slightly overrated, but that's still fine. We've still got a long way to go, a long way in the season. This is not the most important thing that's going to happen all season long. So, there's a lot of football left to be played, and that's why a lot of people are ignoring this, but still key things there. And who is out of the playoff race after this week? Auburn controlled their own destiny. No longer. Auburn's out. And could we say Washington's out? Washington has a pathway. However, Washington needs to win out. They still control their own destiny. So to speak, we're going to have Ohio State or Michigan come out of there. It would work best for Washington if we had Michigan win. It wouldn't cause a huge stir with Penn State going to the Big Ten championship game. And then you just have one team there. And maybe you can convince the committee to get it if you went out. And I assume you could. And then you'd have one team from the Big Ten, Alabama. You'd have Clemson probably from the ACC. And then you'd have Washington. So they're not kicked out. But Penn State, an alleyway opened up. With Michigan losing, they don't quite control their own destiny, but if Michigan loses to Ohio State, Penn State has got a road. It's going to be hard for Oklahoma. And it's going to be hard for Oklahoma State. Also, it's going to be easier for West Virginia if they win, but it's still going to be tough. I'm not saying that any of those teams control their own destiny. Well, that'll do it for us today. It's Gridiron Glory. It's episode 12. And we thank you for joining us. Please follow us at @TheFootballKids. That's @TheFootballKids. Please subscribe. We don't have a single subscriber yet, and we really would appreciate your help. We're just getting started. We're kids. We're not getting paid for this. We're not getting compensated. No monetary compensation. Just the compensation of seeing that we have the 2 viewers like you. The 1 subscriber that means the world to us. And just thank you for being that 1 subscriber. You mean so much to us. And also, please check out our blog at Gridiron Glory, sportsblog.weebly.com. Well, that's it for Gridiron Glory, episode 12. I'm Alexander Cook from the studio, and enjoy your week. Friday, here's the preview. On Friday, we'll show you what you want to watch on Saturday, the big games, the predictions, Thursday night football recap. It's all on Friday. Gridiron Glory. It's episode 13. Episode 13. Oh! It's only on YouTube. Please check in on Friday maybe by 9 o'clock you'll be on. Yeah, okay, yeah. Enough of the gas. Yeah, it's Gridiron Glory. Please subscribe. Follow us on our Twitter account at the Football Kids. That's at the Football Kids. Check out our sports blog. Yeah, it's a sports blog. Well, it's mostly about football and sports. Gridiron Glory, sportsblog.weebly.com. Thank you.